haired totemic figure who persuaded a nation to believe that Brexit equalled a better Britain. Is he therefore responsible for the shambles, or parliamentary jiggery-pokery, as he calls it in his column this morning, we are currently enduring? Former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson joins me now.
Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Good to see you again, Mr. Johnson. Do you regret now Britain Brexiting?
No, we haven't yet Brexited, which is, of course, the exciting prospect we have in store. Look, everybody can argue for, if they want, as I've seen reputable people do, to go back into the European Union. John Major was basically saying that. Loads of people say, we should reverse the result of the referendum. I don't agree with that. I think the EU continues to evolve in a direction that is very much contrary to the instincts of our democratic our system, our what we want for this country. They want to harmonise taxation. They want to have a Euro army. It's not. You can't get back into the same thing.
So when Mrs. May will say later today, and it's been trailed in newspapers this morning, that if you and your colleagues, if you don't vote for her deal, we will be permanently tied to Brussels. Is the Prime Minister right?
Well, I think actually it's the other way round. If we do vote for her deal, we'll be permanently tied to the EU's customs union, to the EU's regulatory model. We'll have to continue to accept laws from Brussels. We'll be rules takers. That's not the way forward for this country. As I say, you can make a case for Britain signing up for a federal Europe, as John Major does, and fine, go on. Okay, I don't think that's what the British people voted for. It wasn't me. It was 17.4 million people voted to come out. They have a bright vision for this country. They see how we can do things differently, and I think they were very interested and excited by the prospect of free trade deals, of being able to govern ourselves again.
But that's not what we have now, Mr. Johnson.
And maximise the advantages of Brexit. All those, or a lot of them, are negated by the deal that is before Parliament.
And so what
tomorrow.
Is your deal? Many people say that you and others, you know what you don't like, and you helped bring about the Brexit result, although we haven't, I take on board Brexit. So what do you want?
Well, I think actually if you listen to...
Really
in detail. Okay. Well, what needs to happen in the next few days, if, as I think you and I both expect, the current withdrawal agreement is voted down...
Extraordinary, if not.
Then the Prime Minister needs to come back to Parliament. She needs to say roughly the following. She needs to say that there are good bits in the withdrawal agreement which we intend to retain.
Do you mean? You refer to them as sensible bits in your bit. What do you mean sensible bits?
So, for instance, on the cases that are currently before the European Court of Justice, how you will deal with them when they conclude, how those verdicts will be applied. Cases such as mutual recognition of professional qualifications, the rights of citizens. All those sorts of things are sensible. We should try and park those, bank them.
Why would the EU let us?
Because it's very much in the interest of both sides to do so. The real problem with the current withdrawal agreement is that it does keep us locked into the customs union, which means that we can't control our own tariffs. So in a very real sense, we won't have taken back control of our borders, which was something that was promised to be. We'll be collecting tariffs on behalf of Brussels. 80% of the value, 80% of that cash will be passed from the UK to Brussels. We won't be able, therefore, since you can't control your tariff schedules, we won't be able to do free trade deals. And that, I think, will be, as I say, it will void much of the point.
You want to withhold half the £39 billion. On what grounds? And
so I think what the Prime Minister should say in addition is we're going to take out the backstop, as I say, which is the Irish protocol, which is so problematic. Because basically what it does, I think people don't really understand why it's such a trap.
But the EU won't allow it.
Well, I think they will.
They'll say that the Irish Republic need their support and their comfort and their guidance.
Yes, but actually, and I understand that, but and nobody underestimates the importance of the Irish border, the political symbolism contained therein, but nobody wants a hard border. And it's been absolutely clear, both from Leo Varadkar, from everybody in London, from Brussels, nobody's going to institute a hard border. There's no need for physical infrastructure controls.
I still don't see why the EU would accept this.
Because I think they will want to do a deal that is in the interests of both sides and that allows the UK to exit in an orderly and successful way.
75 days or whatever.
I see no reason why it shouldn't be achieved. I'll tell you why.
Briefly, and then we must go to the first
I'm sorry,
call.
yes,
No, but I've got...
So you agree that you're going to take out the backstop, but what you also do is you agree the implementation period, so-called, and you use that period of, up to the end of 2020 to negotiate the bulk and probably all of the free trade agreement,
and just unilaterally withhold half the cash.
Yeah, because that's entirely
But
reasonable.
if in a divorce settlement you can't, and you have to give your partner, your ex-wife or your ex-husband, £100,000, you can't say, well, here's 50.
Yes, but I mean, in any kind of negotiation, you don't conclude the financial settlement until you've concluded the terms of the separation or whatever it is. So
you think
the
they'd
mistake,
accept half,
I think
50% on the dollar?
Entirely
50
reasonable.
cents on the dollar.
Entirely reasonable that we should hold at least half of the 39 billion until we've done the free trade agreement. Right. So that's the way forward. And actually, it's not just me who's been saying this. Others have been saying this for weeks, months. That is what needs to happen. And actually, I think there is a very good chance now that it will happen, because I really don't see this deal getting through.
I think you're probably right there. Let's see what others make of it. Axel is in Uxbridge, appropriate enough, and is the first caller. Axel, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Johnson.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I'm an EU citizen who's living actually in Ruislip, so in your constituency. And on the 1st of June 2016, during the referendum, you issued a statement that EU citizens, there will be no change, that the new status will be automatic, and more so, we will be treated no less different or no less favourably than currently at present. After 943 days now, we've ended up with settled status, which is none of that, which is actually a scheme where we have to apply to pay to stay.
Well, how long have you been here, Axel? So, how long have you lived here?
I've been here for 21 years.
Well, you have absolutely... You have indefinite leave to remain.
I haven't asked my question.
Yes, of course.
I haven't asked my question.
If you could put your question now then, Axel. Thank you.
Yes, I will. My question to you is, do you regret luring people into a false sense of certainty that their EU citizens, friends, family, neighbours will be secure in the case of Brexit?
Well,
when we ended up with something that is nothing of what you said it would be.
Let's hear from.
I'm afraid I don't agree with you about your own status, at least, Axel, because as far as I understand the matter, you are entitled to indefinite leave to remain automatically. By virtue of having lived here for more than 5 years, and those who have been here for a shorter period are at liberty to register at any time, and you know, if they stay here for the requisite period, they will also get indefinite leave to remain. So we've done a huge amount to try to reassure the 3.2 million EU citizens who live and work here. And I think what you will have heard from me time and time again, Axel, both as Mayor and as Foreign Secretary and today, is how much I value the contribution made by EU nationals to our city, to our country, and how very keen we are for them to stay. And I certainly hope that you will be staying, and all your family will be staying.
Axel, thank you. John, you're the next call. A question on email. Nick in Barnstable ask him, why did he bottle it when he had the chance to run for Prime Minister when it was first announced we were coming out of the EU, so why should we trust him now? Boris Johnson.
Well, Nick, I'm afraid you're asking a very difficult, very painful question. You're absolutely correct. The things did not eventuate, in the words of, I think it was the Emperor Hirohito, entirely, in the way.
Why?
Because it was a complicated business. I had a campaign that I wanted to get going, and has been exhaustively and painfully documented. There was a. Do
you regret it now?
In retrospect, if I had my time again, I might have done things differently.
By which means you would have gone for it.
But anyway, but Nick is making a valid point, and I certainly have engaged in a lot of heart searching about it ever since.
But it's not over until the fat lady sings. Would you have another go?
Look, there's
Cincinnatus, whatever it was it Cincinnatus? You get the call?
Cincinnatus. The plough, the row I am hoeing now is far more important, because what I am doing or currently what I'm trying to do is we were talking about just now, is I'm trying to get people to understand why.
No, I hear that.
Great
but
Brexit,
is the reality
Brexit
when you bottled it, you didn't have enough support from your Conservative colleagues?
No, I don't know about I don't know about that, and anyway, there's no point crying over spilt milk. The point is to get on and look at where we are today.
Okay, that's what we're doing with John in New Cross.
And there is no vacancy today, the other key point.
John in New Cross. John, you're on the radio. Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson.
John.
After the referendum of 2016 and for the 2 years thereafter, you held one of the great offices of state as Foreign Secretary and sat in Cabinet with David Davis as Brexit Secretary and Liam Fox as International Trade. In that time, no satisfactory arrangement for leaving the EU was reached. Is it not time to admit that the Brexit you described and promised is undeliverable?
Well, no, John, because I think what happened, if you look at the history of the political discussions during that period, was that the controversy about leaving at all really continued within government, and the very large forces within the UK establishment in Whitehall, across government, who really fought the Leave campaign, who were the architects of Project Fear. They were still, after all, sitting in the Treasury, indeed some of them in number 10. They were determined to attenuate or to frustrate Brexit if they possibly could. And so what was really happening, John, in that period was a kind of battle for the steering wheel of Brexit, and a contest about which was the direction we should be going in. And you're right that to people like David Davis and myself would sometimes feel, as we did at Lancaster House, when the Prime Minister made a very good speech setting out, I thought, a very positive, upbeat vision for an independent UK trade policy, independent regulatory powers. There were moments when we felt we had the wind in our sails and we thought we were winning. And then there were very depressing times when it was clear that those who fundamentally wanted to remain in the EU and who wanted to frustrate Brexit, and, as I say, to negate any potential advantages, did have the upper hand. We're now in the final stages of that argument, and the withdrawal agreement that is before Parliament tomorrow night, I'm afraid, does incarnate a lot of those Remain tendencies. It basically would keep us locked into the customs union and, as I say, in regulatory alignment with the EU. There is a much better, brighter future that we should be seizing.
All right, John, thank you. Richard in Chichester, you're through to Boris Johnson. Go ahead, Richard. Morning to you.
Yes, hi there. So there's hundreds of thousands of jobs that have been lost due to Brexit across manufacturing, retail services, from Jaguar, Land Rover, Rolls-Royce, House of Fraser, Pound Oil, Tesco. I mean, the list goes on forever. The pound is in the doldrums. Our economy is on the brink of recession. We're the lowest growing economy in Europe.
That's not true. None of those things are true. Absolutely not a single one of those
Let's hear from Boris Johnson. Richard, I will come back to you. Do you want to counter all those?
Yes, as to the best of my knowledge, Richard, I don't want to accuse you of spreading gloom and despondency, but not a single one of those statements is true. Actually, if you look at employment in this country, it was prophesied to increase by 500,000 as a result of the temerity of the British people to vote to leave. Actually, the number of jobs has gone up by 800,000. We now have employment at a record high. You mentioned Jaguar Land Rover. Actually, if you look at the reasons for the redundancies at JLR, as the management themselves pointed out, it is overwhelmingly to do with the diesel crisis and indeed the decline
Ralph
of markets.
Speth, the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover, will be very, very critical China. If we see a hard Brexit or a no deal. Companies will disappear, plants will close. There's no way to survive a hard Brexit for many industries. I would suggest he knows more about car manufacture than you do.
Well, actually, it's an interesting point. I'm not certain he does, by the way.
You know more about making cars than the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover.
Let me tell you why I say
this is brilliant.
Well, in one particular respect, and I just toss this in for what it's worth, but 6 years ago, or thereabouts, Ralph came to my office in City Hall, and we had a conversation about the future of electric vehicles, which I was then trying to champion in London, as you may dimly remember. Yes. And London then had, I think, 1,700 electric vehicles on the roads. And I was desperate to increase them, and I thought that because I wanted to get down vehicle emissions in London and to tackle the air quality problem. And Ralph, this is one. I do not claim superior knowledge of every aspect of car manufacturing. Okay, but I simply said that I thought that EVs, electric vehicles, did represent the future, that we should be going down that track. He said, no, diesel is great. We should stick with this. And I'm afraid, I hesitate to say this, but I think events have vindicated me on that point rather than him. Right. And if you look today, Jaguar Land Rover is finally producing, admittedly in Austria, a very, very good electric vehicle, which one day I hope to save up enough money to buy.
The way you're going, there'll be a long way for you to save up money. When Ian Duncan-Smith, your Conservative colleague, says...
all I'm saying is, I've never forgotten that conversation, because dear Ralph was, I think, thumpingly wrong about that.
When Ian Duncan-Smith, and I will come back to Richard for a follow-up, when he says not a single job would be lost in a hard Brexit, fears of leaving with no deal and nonsense, so not a single job. In real terms, obviously.
Look, I think it's very important. Right? I mean, a lot of your callers, our callers this morning, Nick, have really sort of said the same thing. Didn't you sell a false, bill of goods? Didn't you advertise?
Yeah, you're
dreams,
the Arthur Daly. Really.
Exactly, snake oil and all that.
Yes, you just told us that you could make better cars than Jaguar, but don't go on.
I made a very modest point about EVs and the future, and I think, and I'm sure Ralph will come on to your programme later.
We'll be getting hold of him.
Yeah. He will remember this conversation. I don't agree with that. I think that Brexit can be fantastic, but it depends how you do it.
You've got to be very, very clear.
There is very little point in leaving the EU in such a way as to remain run by
Richard,
the
quick
EU.
Follow-up from you to allow you back in. Richard of Chichester, go ahead. Good Richard of Chichester.
So every week we hear of job losses, we hear how badly the economy is doing, how shops are closing and so on. Where is the evidence that there is any upside to Brexit?
Well, actually, if you look at, I'll give you one thing, Richard, that's happened recently, and people should care about this, because I think one of the most toxic effects of globalisation in the last 20 or 30 years has been people's feeling that their wages never rise. And what we've seen actually in the last couple of years at last is a tightening of the labour market, but also an increase in people's take-home pay. And Richard, that matters to me. And it was something that came up time and time again in the debate in 2016, in the debate leading up to the referendum. And it's also, I must finish Richard, because Richard said this country's doing worse than the other country. It's not true. Actually, the UK is once again one of the fastest growing countries in the EU. The Eurozone is heading, I'm afraid, for choppy water again. Look at what's happening in France. Look at what's happening in Germany. Look at the state of the Italian banks. And Richard, let me tell you that the signature project of the European Union, the euro. I was in Greece recently, and that country still has 35% absolute poverty. And that is what the economics of the European Union has done to a great European country.
We've only got another 9 minutes, so and there are other people with other questions in other areas, interesting enough. Gassem is in Lewisham. Gassem, you're through to Boris Johnson. Go ahead. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
My niece, who is now 16, and she loves your hairstyle. She looks like a letterbox. Last summer, a man when he's 14 tried to take off her niqab and then tried to strangle her mum while she was trying to defend her. The police viewed the CCTV footage of the bus, but they was unable to identify the suspect.
Right.
My niece is studying hard to become
What is your question to Boris Johnson? This is about a piece I think he wrote in August that suggested that women in burqas looked like either bank robbers or letterboxes. Well, which was Gassem's niece, a bank robber or a letterbox?
As I understand it, Gassem's niece was not wearing. She was wearing a niqab rather.
Oh, right, okay, but she still, as a result, apparently. Do you agree that you brought about an unfortunate anti-Muslim rhetoric?
I don't, and I would be appalled if that were the case. And actually I received, having written that piece, I received overwhelming support, not just from Muslims, but also, above all, from Muslim women who agreed with me that there could be
Would you ever use those words again?
oppressive Yes, of course I would. Oppressive
You'd write that in
features.
your Telegraph column
I
again.
would, and actually they had quite interestingly, they had a sort of inquiry or
Yes,
panel.
code of conduct.
That's right.
It delivered on December 20th, which found you completely in the clear.
They did, and I think it's very, very important. People say, politicians should be careful what they say and they should watch their words and all this sort of mumbo jumbo. I don't agree. I really don't.
Even if it's
offensive. I think one of the reasons.
But even if it's offensive, Mr. Johnson.
I don't want to cause offence if I can possibly avoid it.
Then don't refer to them as bank robbers.
I think
You just said you would again.
I think that one of the duties of a politician is to speak his mind or her mind insofar as possible, and that is
even if
that
it
is
causes
because
offence. So you're Donald Trump now.
no,
Even
I
if you
don't.
know you're going to offend a group of people.
Well, I offend people by saying that the Britain should leave the European Union.
No, but this is more personal
well-
about the way they choose to dress, saying they're either a bank robber or a letterbox.
No, I didn't.
And you've said you'd use those words again. Why? Why would you not learn from mistakes? Shouldn't politicians also learn from mistakes?
Look, if people are offended, if people
But you
feel
do it
insulted,
again.
then yes, I would, because actually, I'm going to be very clear with you, Nick. I don't agree with women being cajoled to wear clothing that obscures their faces.
How do you know they're cajoled? Maybe they
because
like it.
many of them are.
But many of them might not be.
Well,
many of them might
that's
be
also
happy.
that's also true. But then somebody has to speak up for those who aren't, and that is the duty of politicians.
Jason's in Bromley to talk about other politicians. Jason, what do you want to ask Boris Johnson?
Hello, Mr. Johnson.
Hello, Jason.
Hello. In my opinion, Khan has completely failed London. He's done it massively.
Sadiq Khan, yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sadiq Khan.
Yep.
Now, my question
Sadiq
to you,
Khan.
Mr. Johnson, is if you could go back into office for 24 hours, what would you do to try and tackle knife crime? Now,
Well, if you were back, I'll keep you on the line, and you go back as mayor, go back into City Hall, you've only got 24 hours. We're talking at a time, of course, as you will be aware, Mr. Johnson, tragically, 130 people lost their lives to homicides last year. It has to be said, when you became mayor in 2008, the figure was greater than that. It was 154, but you brought about you and your colleagues. How did you do it, and what would you do?
Well, what I would do, Jason, is I would immediately get the chief of police in with her senior officers, and we'd have a big conversation about it. And they need to feel empowered and confident that, or if they stop a kid in the street who is going equipped, who's carrying a bladed weapon, who's going out with a gang, that they will feel empowered to take that knife off them without feeling that the law is going to come down on them like a ton of bricks for somehow infringing the rights of that kid. And of course, you've got to do stop and search sensitively. You've got to do it in accordance with the law. And I would be saying that to the police. But what we should do is do roughly what we did in 2008, 2009, when we brought in Operation Blunt 2, where we took tens of thousands of knives off the streets of London. And Nick is quite right, because what happened then was, yes, there was a lot of barracking and belly aching from lawyers and from people who said it was too hard and so on and so forth. But the people who backed us were the mums and dads of the kids who were at risk of losing their lives.
And you got the figure down to the lowest figure, which is still 94 too many. You'd be the first to admit, but in 2014, you'd almost halved it.
Yeah, we did. And I think, this is the greatest city on earth. I always say that when I was mayor. I love it. It's the most fantastic place. It is the most productive. I mean, just back to Richard's point about the economy. This is easily the most productive part of the whole European economy. But it will only work if people feel secure. And it's the number one job of the mayor to fight crime and to make people
Is he
feel
failing?
Well, I don't like the way the figures are going, and I think it's very, very sad. And so that is what I would do.
And what about you? You talk about being very robust about stop and search. A previous Home Secretary, of course, cautioned the police about the use of stop and search. Was she wrong?
Well, insofar as it, I think, discouraged them, made people feel that they couldn't be confident that politicians would back them up. I mean, when you're Home Secretary or you're mayor, you've got to recognise that your job is not just to represent the public to the police. Your job, to a certain extent, is to be the champion of a great public service, which is what the police are. We have the best police in the world.
She wasn't doing that, was she?
They need to feel that in the end, the politicians have their back. Yes, if they're corrupt, they're going to get done. Yes, if they behave thuggishly towards young kids, they're going to get done. But in the end, we are on the side of the police and on the side of law and order.
We've mentioned Mrs May. In that recent vote of no confidence of the Prime Minister, how did you vote?
I don't discuss my
Well, I'll take that you voted against. You voted. You had no confidence. Persuade me otherwise.
What you can certainly. And it's been no secret to our listeners this morning, I don't agree with the current direction. I think it's we have a chance.
Yes, we've had
we
that.
have a chance to get this right.
You voted with no confidence in that. Eddie in Harrow, you once said we'll leave no stone unturned to bring home jailed mother Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe. What have you done since making that statement? This, as it is announced, of course, that the poor woman is to start a hunger strike today, as you probably heard on the news bulletins.
Well, Nazanin's case is a very, very sad one, and it's one of, I'm afraid, several very difficult and very sad consular cases that we have with Iran. The FCO, Foreign Office, has a brilliant team that work on.
No, but what
this
have you
case
done?
And others. Well, what I did really was to work with them to lobby the Iranian authorities in any way that I could. I went out there, but it's very important for people to remember that the culprits in this matter are the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force as they're called. They're the people who are putting the pressure on the judicial system, who are insisting on treating UK dual nationals, UK Iranian dual nationals in this way. They are, I'm afraid, to blame for the appalling treatment of Nazanin and others.
BuzzFeed reported you've had communication with Steve Bannon. Is that correct? Over your political future?
I have not spoken to Mr. Bannon for a very long time. I met him in the White House when he was advising the president. But I first met him. It's very interesting. I first met him when we all went out to talk to what was then going to. They hadn't even got into the White House yet, and he's a very interesting kind of conservative, Steve Bannon, because we had a huge row about the mines, about the closure of the mines in the UK under Margaret Thatcher, which of course is an issue that in our country today is still very, very keenly contested. People feel very strongly about it, and
you don't get many conservative voters in some of those pit towns.
Well, you don't, absolutely, and people still feel very raw and very angry about it. Now, I still think, and it's one of the reasons that I wasn't at university. I actually became vaguely conservative because I thought it was wrong of Scargill and his lot to go on strike without a ballot.
Right.
And I basically,
so he's to blame.
Yeah, I basically became in favour of what Margaret Thatcher was doing which was quite unfashionable. Anyway, we had this huge row about it, and because he basically thought that we should have kept the pits open with public money, and I thought that was a very interesting tack for a conservative.
I've got to ask you this: what happens tomorrow?
I think
She gets defeated. What happens then, Boris Johnson?
I think the deal goes down. I couldn't say by how many. I think possibly some colleagues are being scared by this idea that there might be no Brexit as a result of voting out. I think that's nonsense.
Britain will still Brexit in March.
Britain will leave in March, absolutely, and that's the bottom line. I think.
What about these plots?
I notice all this stuff about complicated jiggery pokery for Parliament to frustrate the.
Yes, that's what you refer to in the television.
The deal. I don't think that really can be done. I think that we are really playing with fire. If we think that by coming up with all sorts of complicated amendments and delaying tactics, we're going to fool the British public, we're going to manage to frustrate Brexit, I think we will reap the whirlwind.
What do you mean by that?
Reap the whirlwind. Well, I think that people will feel betrayed, and I think they will feel that there's been a great conspiracy by the deep state of the UK, the people who really run the country, to.
So we'll witness more of what we saw with Anna Soubry then, potential, a lot of anger.
Well, I don't wish it.
No, I
don't wish it at all, and it's difficult to predict what will happen, but I do think that people will be appalled if Parliament does.
Have we lost the neutral referee and the Speaker, as one of your Conservative colleagues, Crispin Blunt, suggests?
I'm never been one of those the Speaker's always been pretty good to me. I've got to be clear. He's always, he calls me. I'm not one of those who feels.
Yeah, I didn't ask you what you felt about him. I asked whether you thought we've lost him his neutrality.
But it doesn't seem to me that he has played a blinder on this one. I think he does look as though he is trying to collaborate with people who want to stop Brexit. Whether he intends that or not, it's hard for me to know. He's giving that impression. That is
Should he be replaced?
Unfortunate. Well, I think he's said that himself that he will at some stage.
Well, he said that before, though, didn't he?
He will at some
Are you surprised
stage.
Michael Gove is still in cabinet?
Look, these are matters for. There's a matter for.
But are you surprised?
It's a matter for him.
Do you have problems with wood-burning stoves? He does.
Wood-burning. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do think that it's starting to become absolutely tyrannical. This. I mean, honestly, what next? They ban. You have to have calorie counts on everything. I don't know about. I thought wood-burning stoves were perfectly okay. I'm stunned to find that the government is now going to.
Have you got one?
To ban. Well, I have. I think I've got more than one, if I'm totally honest. But yes.
So you won't be able to burn.
Well, I'm going to have to ask my friend Michael to inhale some fumes and see how bad it is, and I don't know what.
Yes.
It does seem very, very, very striking.
Now, if you're not in the papers for your Brexit views, Mr. Johnson, you're recently in the papers for other matters. How do you feel that the target currently of your amour has almost had a target painted on her back?
Well.
Carrie Simons.
I seem to remember many happy conversations with you when I was to come into the studio,
Yes.
Nick, on all sorts of things, and I never ever got into anything.
No?
Concerning my private life. And
No, but I have to put it to you.
I
mean,
my respect for you is unbounded. My respect for you is unbounded. But
well, I have to put it to you. I mean, this is. How do you feel towards her?
You do have.
That you put a target on her back.
You do have to.
I just feel. How do you feel?
My different. You have to put it to me, and I have to give you my standard answer, which I do.
Yes, so you don't feel contrite that she has a target on her back.
I don't discuss these things, and nor with can I also say quite seriously, given the gravity of the subjects that we have discussed this morning, we talked about the future of our country, about the opportunities our country has, about the future constitution of our country that will be decided by MPs tomorrow night. We've talked about knife crime and how to get it down. We've talked about the economy and jobs and wages. I really think in the grand scheme of things, that is really what our listeners want us to talk about.
Boris Johnson, thanks for joining me here on LBC, where news is next.
Boris Johnson has told LBC he thinks the European Union would agree to a Brexit deal without the Irish backstop. The EU has consistently said the measure, aimed at preventing a hard border, must be included in any deal with the UK. The former Foreign Secretary has also denied creating a vision of Brexit that was undeliverable. Ahead of tomorrow's vote on her deal, Theresa May says it's now more likely that MPs will block Brexit than allow a no-deal outcome. A woman has died and her baby son is in a life-threatening condition in hospital after being hit by a car in